students who have sat in 303 and studied this poem with me went on after high school to join our armed services and be in war. Sitting in the very chair where you're sitting. And then writing back to me and saying, you know, when you ask about what is the work of war, I know now. Whew. Tough one. The second thing, now we're back at level 1. The second thing that Wheatley does in this poem is she celebrates not only the Revolution, but Washington. I'm with you on the top of page 126, right? She asks a question, shall I recite the praise of Washington? Enough thou knowest them in the fields of fight, thee, which means you, Washington, first in peace and honors. Whoa, we want to write that line down at level 1. First in peace and honors. Now what's ironic about the fact that she says that General Washington, I'm at the top of page 126, the top of page 126, notice what she says, right? First, at line 25, first in peace and honors. First in peace. The title of the poem says, General Washington. Dude, this guy is engaged in a war. He is fighting and watching his own troops die. And he's also fighting to kill British troops. And yet she celebrates him as first in peace. What's the second one that you wrote down? Honor. When George Washington is voted President of the United States, the question is what to call him. What to call him. Will you call him some celebrated name like the King of England is called? Your Highness. Or something like that. And Washington says, no. When you reference me, just call me Mr. President. He was a man very, let's write the word down, humble. What does it mean to be humble? You don't call attention to yourself and say, look at me, look at me, look at me. Washington was rather a cat that liked to say, I don't want to be looked at. And yet notice she celebrates him as the first in peace and honor. A couple of more lines down. You read it? Famed for thy, do you see the word valor? I'd write that word down. Famed for thy valor. Okay? Now, if you'll go back to 122 for just a second, I want to point this out for the examination that's coming, okay? Because in our examinations, we not only are going to ask questions about these titles, but we're also going to ask questions about, there it is on page 122. Do you see it at the bottom of the page on 122? Do you see where it says vocabulary? Do you see that on 122 where it says vocabulary at the very bottom of the page? These are words which might be on the examination, and you want to make sure that you have some sense of it. For example, the word propitious. We're picking up a word, though, that's not even listed there. Valor. What does the word valor mean? She's going to celebrate his courage. His courage, right? Notice she finally calls him great chief. Are you with me in the last lines on page 126? With virtue on thy side. I'm at line 3940. In other words, America will win, the colonists will win because they are right. Skip up a few lines above that. Notice, Britannia droops. What is Britannia? That's English. In other words, Wheatley says, Britain is doing this. As the colonists are doing this. It's an interesting word picture. Question, how do you think British troops felt when they read this poem? As they began to realize maybe it's over. They weren't going to win. There has been an argument that in large measure Britain gave up in the American Revolutionary War. That's an interesting discussion. It's a historic one and maybe one we can have later. Okay, let's take a look now at our annotations for final comments. At level 1, Pretty simple. How do we summarize it? This is a poem that does two things. Let's write it down if you haven't got it written down. At level 1. This is a poem that does two things. 1, it celebrates the Revolutionary War. 2, it celebrates the chief or the leader of that Revolutionary War, George Washington. Level 2A, themes, messages from this poem. Pretty simple ones. Let's write down a few. 1, the American Revolution is a war that is work. The work of war. 2, the American Revolution is a war that is right. R-I-G-H-T. Correct. It's not wrong, it's right. 3, George Washington is the reason the American colonialists will win. Whoa! A little bit of hero celebration going on here, right? You can kind of understand why Washington himself kind of decided not to publish this, right? Or maybe you can't, because we live in an age where ball players, for example, and media people, like movie stars, right? They like it, right, when the camera is all on them. They even sometimes make reality shows where they say, look at me, so they can do what? Make lots of this, right? Washington, we find out another message, is very humble man. It isn't about him. It's about the revolution. 2B, very simple. I mean, you heard it right away. I mean, look at the very last lines on page 126. Proceed, great chief, with virtue on thy side. I'm slowing it down. Thy every action let the goddess guide. Notice sight and guide rhyme. This is what we talk about by heroic couplet. In other words, every 2 lines rhyme. Look at the last one. A crown, a mansion, and a throne that shine with gold unfading, Washington be thine. Notice, did you hear the rhythms, by the way, inside that line as well, right? Okay, so we've got that situation as well, all right? Finally, let's go ahead and write it down. We've got a situation in terms of 3A. What is for you your favorite text about war? What's your favorite movie about war? What's your favorite video where there's fighting? What is for you your favorite show about the struggle? Do you have a struggle show that for you really works? Let me ask you this question. You can just write down. What is for you the title that is the best one for you, text, title, video, movie, about celebrating a person? Okay? Celebrating a person. Finally, at 2B, go ahead and jot down for yourself, simply answer this question in a couple of lines. Do you think of yourself as a humble person or as a vain person? Do you think of yourself as a person that kind of doesn't want the attention? Look at me, look at me, look at me. Or are you more inclined to say you're the kind of person that says, yeah, that's me. You got a problem with that? How do you see that? Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing to be a person that draws attention to yourself? Right? Do you think of yourself, last question for 3B. This is a really interesting one when we study George Washington. Jot it down. Do you think you're a leader or are you a follower? Are you a person that tells other people, this is what I'm going to do, and then you do it? Or are you a person that kind of says, dude, what do you think we should do? And then you kind of follow along. Well, there you go. An introduction to Phillis Wheatley's classic little poem, a tribute poem to George Washington. Thank you.